Introduction from the government, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Aleyna Young, and I'm here with my co-counsel, Ms. Madison Thomas. Good afternoon, Your Honor. Together, we represent the government of the United States.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Sam Farnsworth. I'm joined at council table by my friend and colleague, Mr. Aleyna.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
We represent the defendant in today's case, Blake Crosby.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Preliminary matters from the government, Your Honor. First, we'd like to ask for your preference for movement about the well, approaching opposing counsel, the witness, Your Honor.
You don't need to ask permission unless you're going to approach the witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Next, we'd like to invoke Rule 603, which calls for the constructive swearing in of all witnesses. Your Honor, we prepared a bench book for Your Honor and an exhibit binder for the witness. Both of these have been shown to opposing counsel. Permission to bring these to Your Honor and the witness.
Sure. You have none. None, what do you think?
Yes, Your Honor, we do. Your Honor.
You saw all those exhibits you're going to.
Yes,
Your Honor, pursuant to stipulation, there are a couple of documents that all objections have been waived to. We'd like to admit exhibits 16 and 17 into evidence at this time.
No objection.
without objection.
And Your Honor, with that, the government is ready to go.
No, Your Honor, we're ready to move to opening statements.
So,
May it please the court. Members of the jury. The defendant's politics turned personal. Members of the jury, we live in a political world now. It's more than that. Whether you like to stay involved or you prefer to stay out of it, I think it's fair to say that our recent history has had a lot of political controversy. You see, in July of 2022, a senator from California was just trying to find his place in it all. His name was Thomas Capello. Last July, he started his campaign to run for president. On July 4th, 2022, Senator Capello came to Rittenhouse Square just a few blocks from him. As he went to the stage, he saw tens, thousands of people. What he didn't see was a rifle being loaded from a rooftop just blocks away. What he didn't see was that rifle being aimed right at him. What he didn't see was a bullet flying over the city, straight for his forehead. He didn't see it. He was killed instantly. Evidence will show exactly who pulled that trigger. The defendant. Members of the jury, as the government, we have the burden of proof in this case. This means we're going to prove to you that the defendant killed Senator Capello and that he did so intentionally. We're going to prove both of these things to you beyond a reasonable doubt, which just means that by the end of this trial, there won't be another reasonable explanation of the evidence. We're going to meet our burden. You see, you're going to learn about the defendant again. You'll learn the defendant was in the military for 8 years and that Senator Capello held beliefs the defendant couldn't stand. You're going to learn the defendant was obsessed with taking Senator Capello down, and the evidence will show he did something. See, throughout this trial, we're going to meet our burden by bringing you evidence of 3 things. The defendant wanted Senator Capello dead. He knew how to do it. And he had the chance to do it. So first, the defendant wanted Senator Capello dead. Members of the jury, you're not just going to have to take my word for it. We'll show you the defendant's words himself. You're going to see words he wrote on April 5th, 2022, the same day he signed up to attend that July 4th rally. Capello is a threat to everyone in this country. As long as he's alive, nobody's safe. Second, the defendant knew how to kill that senator. You see, you're gonna learn exactly how the senator died. A bullet to the head. A bullet commonly used with sniper rifles. Members of the jury, you're gonna learn that the defendant was in the military for 8 years as a sniper. You're gonna learn that the defendant knew how to shoot from the exact distance Senator Capello was shot from. That the defendant worked with the exact same type of rifle that the senator was shot from for 8 years. Third, the defendant had the chance to kill the senator. Members of the jury, we're going to bring you evidence that moments before Senator Capello was shot, the defendant was seen climbing to the top of his hotel's roof. Bring the physical evidence to place it. You're going to hear from the lead investigator of this case, and they're going to show you what the forensic lab found. A cigarette at the top of that rooftop that has the defendant's DNA and gunshot residue. Evidence will show the defendant picked up that rifle. He pointed it at the senator, and he locked and he loaded and he pulled that trigger. His beliefs. Only things left safe. Jury, of course, it's okay to disagree with political candidates. You can and you should disagree sometimes. Conviction turns to contempt, turns to a crime, turns to murder. That's what we can't tolerate. That's why at the end of this trial, I'll come before you again. And I'll ask you to find this defendant guilty. Thank you for your time.
Okay, proceed. They can't hide the holes. It's July 4th, 2022. And Secret Service agent Morgan DeVito is horrified. He's crouching over the dead body of a senator that he was supposed to protect. And when he wipes the sweat from his eyes and looks out over the crowd, he sees thousands of people in different stages of shock. Some are screaming, some are crying, but everybody is scared. And Agent DeVito, he's scared too. You see, this tragedy falls on him. And he's a rookie homicide investigator, and the public needs answers fast. But as we all know, there's a difference between a right answer and a fast answer. And the evidence will show today that the government got it wrong. They can't hide the holes in their case. Because you're going to see that the government's only witness is a rookie homicide detective who's never solved a murder before. And you'll see that his inexperience caused him to overlook hole after hole and point the finger at an innocent man. That's a problem for the government. Because today, the government has the burden of proof. That means they have to prove to each and every one of you that my client, Blake Crosby, is guilty of murder beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the very highest burden in our legal system. And that's a burden that stays with the defense and with the defense alone throughout this entire trial. It's a burden they're not going to be able to meet because of 3 holes that they can't plug up. Hole 1. Can we be sure where Blake Crosby was? Hole 2. How would Mr. Crosby have gotten a military-grade sniper rifle? And hole 3. Could someone else have done this crime? Let's break those down together, starting with hole number 1. can we really be sure of where Mr. Crosby was? Because opposing counsel told you that you're going to hear evidence that Mr. Crosby was on the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel when the shooting. But you're going to hear from Mr. Crosby himself. He has a constitutional right not to testify, but he's going to, in order to tell you what really happened. And he's going to tell you that he wasn't on the rooftop of a hotel when the shooting occurred. No. He was at that campaign rally. And we're going to read you from a sworn witness statement that corroborates Mr. Crosby's alibi. You're going to see that's a hole the government can't hide. Hole 2. How would Mr. Crosby have gotten access to a military-grade sniper rifle? Because today, you're going to learn that the government never found the murder weapon. And they don't have an explanation for how my client would have gotten access to what they call a military-grade professional sniper rifle. You're going to see they can't answer that question, and my client never would have had the chance to commit this crime. Hole 3. Could someone else have done this crime? Because today you're going to learn that thousands of people had political disagreements with Senator Capello. Opposing counsel says that politics became personal, but we're going to show you that was true for thousands of people. And you're going to learn that any of those thousands of people could have gotten access to the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel. So while we show you thousands of reasonable suspects, you're not going to see reasonable ways to eliminate them. They can't hide the holes in their case. Now, nobody today is going to deny that what happened to Senator Capello is an absolute tragedy. It was. A presidential candidate was gunned down, and that should never happen. You're going to see today that the government pointed the finger at an innocent man. And you'll know that when you see the holes all throughout their case. That's why at the end of this trial, I'm going to stand before you again and ask you to find my client, Blake Crosby, not guilty. Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor, at this time, the government calls Agent Defendant.
Morning. Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir. Can you introduce yourself to the court?
Good afternoon. My name is Special Agent Morgan DeVito.
What do you do for a living?
I work for the Secret Service, and I do protection detail on a number of political candidates.
What kinds of training did you have to go through to become a special agent?
Well, first, I graduated from UC Chicago with a degree in criminal justice. Then I applied to be in a training camp for Secret Service agents. I graduated and then worked for the next 21 years to a senior special agent where I am today.
What kinds of investigations have you worked on?
I've worked on a number of investigations, mainly protection detail, securing crime scenes, investigating potential threats, as well as bank fraud, cyber fraud, things like that.
So, sir, how are you involved in this case?
I was doing protection detail on Senator Capello when he was shot and killed. I'm here because I saw it happen and I was a part of the investigation that ensued afterwards.
As a part of your investigation, did you identify any suspects?
We did. Immediately after the shooting, we formed a task force with the FBI as well as local law enforcement, and we discovered that the most likely place of this shooting was the Sonesta Hotel about 600 yards away.
Objection, Your Honor, lack of foundation.
Your Honor, this witness just testified that as a part of their investigation, they were there on the day that the senator was shot. And after seeing that the senator was shot and killed, they started their investigation to identify where potentially the shooter could have come from. There's been sufficient foundation laid to establish this witness to determine where the shooter could have come.
So you're gonna then now testify about why he believes he was on that roof at the time?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Sir, who did you ultimately end up arresting at the conclusion of your investigation?
We ultimately ended up arresting the defendant.
Well, I want to walk through your investigation of the defendant and also figure out if there were any holes in your investigation.
Right.
First, let's talk about whether or not the defendant had a reason to kill Senator Capello. Did you find any evidence of a motive?
I did. We went through the defendant's Twitter history and we discovered a threat that he made against Senator Capello about 2 months before the shooting.
Would you recognize one of those tweets if I were to show it to you?
I believe I would.
Sir, if you could go ahead and flip to exhibit 12 in your binder. Do you recognize this?
I do.
Can you tell the members of the jury what this is?
It's the tweet we recovered from Blake Crosby's Twitter account that he made about Senator Thomas Capello.
Does it appear to be a fair and accurate copy of one of those tweets?
It looks like so.
Your Honor, at this time, the government moves exhibit 12 into evidence.
No, Your Honor.
Permission to publish to the members of the jury?
Sure.
Special Agent, can you read for us what this tweet says?
I can. At the top, it says, Thomas R. Capello is a threat to every person in this country. As long as he is alive, none of us are safe.
Sir, throughout your entire investigation, did you find evidence that anyone else had a motive?
I found some indications on the dark web and email that there were threats being made against Senator Capello. However, they didn't match to this kill.
Well, next, I want to talk about whether or not.
Objection on lack of foundation. Maybe heard.
Yeah.
We don't know why the people with the motive in those other threats don't match with this killing. That foundation needs to be on the record before this witness can testify to that conclusion.
Yeah, can you tell me what foundation, or can you write some foundation about why those other folks don't have the motive as you just testified to?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, let's do that.
Yes, Your Honor.
Special Agent, why did you determine that other potential suspects didn't match the same motive as the defendant?
Well, it wasn't that he didn't match the same motive. They didn't have the same skill set as Mr. Crosby. You see, he was a sniper and he had an expert world-class level sniping ability. And that is what allowed him to have the proper skill set to match with the investigation you were doing.
All right, sir, well, let's go ahead and move into the next part, whether or not the defendant knew how to kill Senator Capello. You mentioned that the defendant had some sort of military experience. Can you explain that for the members of the jury?
Yes, he served as a part of the Army for 8 years. He spent 2 years in Afghanistan. He won a number of medals as all Army sniping competitions, as well as holds the record for the longest snipe in the longest bullseye in the U.S. Army.
Sir, we're talking a lot about rifles and guns. Can you tell us if you know how Senator Capello was killed?
I do. As part of my joint task force with the FBI did an investigation into the cause of death as well as the bullet that hit Mr. Capello. We learned that that bullet was a NATO cartridge that is commonly used in sniper rifles.
Do you know what type of bullet this was that was found in the Senator Capello's head?
Yes, it was a NATO cartridge, 7.62 by 51 millimeter.
No, you told us that one of those bullets was found in Senator Capello's head. Did you find evidence of any of those bullets anywhere else throughout your investigation?
We did. On top of the Sonesta Hotel, about 600 yards away from the shooting, we found a bullet that was the exact same color, the exact same type, and in every other way was identical to the bullets, the type of bullets being shot.
Would you recognize that bullet if I showed it to you?
I believe I would.
Your Honor, I'm showing the witness exhibit 5. Sir, do you recognize this?
I do.
What is it?
It's the bullet we found on top of the Sonesta Hotel. It's what matched the bullet that hit Senator Capello.
Does it appear to be a fair and accurate of that bullet?
Looks to be the same.
Your Honor, at this time, the government moves exhibit 5 into evidence.
No objection.
So moved.
Permission to publish to the members of the jury.
Yes.
Sir, did you ask this defendant if he was familiar with this bullet?
We did. 3 days after the shooting, we pulled the defendant in for questioning. And we learned that he was actually intimately familiar with that bullet and had used it commonly throughout his career in the Army.
All right, well, I want to move to talking about whether or not the defendant had the chance to kill Senator.
Okay.
Sir, do you know where the defendant was during the time of the rally?
We actually had an eyewitness that placed him heading up to the top of the roof of the Sinesta Hotel just an hour before the shooting.
Sir, do you know to what degree of certainty that witness was certain that they saw the defendant?
When asked how certain they were, the eyewitness said 100%.
Do you know where the defendant was staying during their time in Philadelphia?
Yes, ma'am. He was staying at the top floor of the Sinesta Hotel, 425.
All right, sir, well, we've talked about the defendant's motive, means, and opportunity, but I want to ask whether or not you have any physical evidence placing him on that roof.
Of course.
Did you find any physical evidence that places the defendant on the Sinesta's hotel rooftop around the time of the rally?
I did. We found a cigarette butt that had the defendant's DNA on the top of the roof of the Sinesta Hotel.
Would you recognize that cigarette butt if I showed it to you?
I believe I would.
Your Honor, approaching the witness with Exhibit 7. Sir, do you recognize this?
Yes, it looks to be the cigarette butt I recovered.
Does it appear to be changed or altered in any way?
No, it looks like the same one.
The government moves Exhibit 7 into evidence.
Without objection.
Permission to publish to the jury. Sir, you told us that the forensics lab found the defendant's DNA on this. Did the forensics lab find anything else on that cigarette butt?
They did. They found gunshot residue.
Thank you, sir, for your time. Thank you, Your Honor. At this point, nothing further.
Yes, Your Honor. Yeah, proceed. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I want to begin by talking about the kind of pressure your investigation was on. Because as you said on direct examination, you were assigned with protecting Senator Capello, correct?
I was.
That means you were there when he was shot, true?
That's right. I was in the crowd, making sure that there were no assailants in the crowd.
And this wasn't a private assassination, was it?
No, he was giving a speech and was hit with a sniper rifle.
That's right. This was a public execution, true?
Yes, it was.
During a campaign rally,
It was.
during a speech,
That's right.
in front of thousands of people, as you said.
Right, there were a lot of people in attendance.
And sir, that's not the only pressure you were under, was it?
I'm not sure what you mean.
You were tasked with investigating that homicide, correct?
Right, I was tasked with making a joint investigation detail with the FBI and with the law enforcement so that we can figure out what happened.
Agent, you'd agree that you're a rookie homicide investigator, aren't you?
No, I would not.
Sir, you've never solved a murder before, correct?
That's right. I haven't been on a homicide case, but I've worked 21 years in Secret Service, 8 years in the current detail I'm in, and I secured a lot of scenes as part of my work. I would not call myself a rookie, fortunately.
When you say that you're not a rookie homicide investigator, to be clear, you've never investigated a homicide before this case. Do I have that right?
No, sorry. Yes, that's why it was so important to have FBI detail and people with loads of experience to help.
Then let's talk about whether Blake Crosby really would have had the chance to commit this crime. Because you'd agree with me, in order to shoot somebody with a sniper rifle, you need to have access to a sniper rifle, right?
That's true.
You never found a sniper rifle on Mr. Crosby's person, did you?
No, what we found was the part of the sniper rifle at a cheesesteak restaurant that we know he went to that day.
Sir, you didn't find any parts of a sniper rifle in his house?
No, we didn't find any sniper rifle parts on his house, just at the restaurant that we know he went to.
Not in his car?
That's right, just the restaurant.
Now, there were no fingerprints on that piece of the gun, right?
That's right.
It was just in a garbage can, right?
And that's right, that, a garbage can in a restaurant, he went,
A garbage can at a public restaurant, true?
and that's right,
A garbage can that anybody could dispose of anything in.
if they were there, yeah.
And you'd agree with me that you've actually kept pretty good track of where Mr. Crosby was before the shooting, correct?
We were able to get to a eyewitness that placed him in the stairwell an hour before the shooting.
Well, even before the day of the shooting, you traced his location using hotel receipts, correct?
Right, he told us that he had actually been following Mr. Capello to all his rallies for all the rallies he had done before to protest, and I was able to confirm that, yes, he did go to all of them, he had hotel receipts for all of them, and a rent car.
Well, let's slow down here because you know Mr. Crosby lives in LA, true?
Right, he flew from LA to Boston to see Mr. Capello.
LA to Boston and then to Cambridge
That's right,
and then to Providence
that's right.
and then to Philadelphia, right?
Yeah, he traveled a long way to follow.
Now, to be clear, you certainly don't think that Mr. Crosby checked a sniper rifle on a plane from LA, true?
I'm not sure how he was.
You don't know whether he brought a sniper rifle with him on a car trip.
No, it's my understanding that it can be broken down, that's why we found one of the parts, so I'm not sure how we concealed it, no.
You never found any evidence he bought a sniper rifle in Boston,
No, yes, that's true.
not in Cambridge,
That's right, I didn't find any evidence that he bought it.
not in Providence.
No, his link to the sniper rifle was that it was identical to the sniper rifle he used in his service. That was his link.
Sir, redirecting back to my question, you found no evidence that he bought a sniper rifle in Providence,
And that's right, I didn't find any evidence that he bought it, just that he was familiar with that type of rifle.
not in Philadelphia either.
That's right.
In fact, you'd agree with me, you found no evidence he ever bought a sniper rifle.
That's right.
Then let's talk about another potential hole in your investigation. Because you'd agree, this wasn't a one suspect crime, was it?
I would agree, yeah.
There were thousands of suspects, correct?
Everyone was a suspect until we were able to narrow it down.
The shooting took place in Rittenhouse Square. Do I have that right?
That's correct.
There were thousands of people there.
Yes, but it was a sniper attack, so the people there actually weren't very useful suspects.
Well, you don't know how many of the people there were armed, do you?
No, there were thousands. I couldn't know everyone that was armed.
You say that you think the shooting happened on the rooftop of a hotel, correct?
That's what the FBI and all the forensic examiners determined.
That's the Sonesta Hotel.
That's right, where we found the bullet.
You don't need to be a guest at that hotel in order to have access to the rooftop, do you?
No, right, that's my understanding. You don't need access, you don't need to be a guest. You can just get to the roof.
You don't need a key.
No, you don't need a key or a key card. You can just get there.
Anybody can access that rooftop, yes or no?
Well, I'm not sure the hotel staff would let just anybody go up the stairwell, but maybe.
Then let's talk about whether politics turned personal for people other than Mr. Crosby. Because you said that part of your job is monitoring mail, correct?
Right, as part of my protection detail, we look at all the potential threats against a candidate.
Monitoring mail for threats.
And that's right.
You also monitor the dark web.
Right, we monitor any possible place, social media, things like that, to figure out if there are any threats.
Monitor social media too.
That's right.
And you found thousands of threats against Senator Capello, correct?
That's right. He's
Now-
a very polarizing candidate. There were a lot of threats.
Thousands of death threats.
Some were death threats, that's right.
Thousands of people who wanted Senator Capello dead. Yes or no?
I'm not sure about that. You know, a lot of people can be pretty verbal online. You're not sure exactly if they mean the things they say, but we saw a lot of online chatter.
You saw thousands of death threats, yes or no?
On online chatter, yes.
And you'd agree with me that any of those thousands of people, well, none of them needed a key to access the rooftop of the Sonesta Hotel. Yes or no?
That's true.
Thank you. No further questions.
Redirect, Your Honor. Special Agent, Mr. Farnsworth asked you some questions about whether or not you were a rookie on this case. Sir, were you the only investigator working on this case?
No, we had 70 law enforcement officers, a lot of FBI agents. My team other teams, we combed through everything we possibly could in order to figure out who killed us.
And Mr. Farnsworth also asked you about the thousands of protesters and the thousands of death threats that the senator received. Who is the only person whose DNA you found on the Sinesta bridge?
The defendant, Blake Crossing.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Your Honor. I have nothing further. Pending no recross, we just ask that Special Agent read this.
Your Honor, may I ask how much time I have left?
52 seconds.
Recross. Sir, you just said that you oversaw over 70 law enforcement agents, right?
Well, they were a part of the group to make sure there was protection.
You were here during opening statement, weren't you?
I was.
You heard Ms. Young say that you were going to testify, right?
I remember that.
How many of those 70 other law enforcement agents did Ms. Young say were going to testify in addition to you?
You didn't say anything. I was leading the details, so he called me.
Thank you. No further questions.
No redirect, Your Honor. We just ask the Special Agent to go retake his seat.
Yes.
With that, Your Honor, the government rests our conclusion.
Your Honor, before we call our first witness, we'd like to move Exhibit 18 into evidence. It's admissible for the same stipulation that opposing counsel read yourself.
Without objection, Your Honor.
Sure, what's exhibit 8?
It's an affidavit of a eyewitness to this event.
And what's the eyewitness?
Ray Judd. At this time, defense calls Blake Crosby the witness stand. May I proceed? Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the members of the jury.
Hi, my name is Blake Crosby.
Sir, have you been here throughout this trial?
I have.
Then I want to give you a chance to respond directly to what the government is saying. Did you ever shoot Senator Capella on July 4th?
Absolutely not, sir.
Did you ever own a military-grade sniper rifle on July 4th?
Not once.
Then let's backtrack a little bit and talk a little bit more about you. What do you do for a living?
Honestly, it's a lot of odd jobs. I drive for Lyft, I drive for Uber. It was hard to get a job after I left the service.
You say you left the service. What did you do in the Army?
I was in the Army for about 8 years. I worked as a sniper.
And where did you serve?
I served in a lot of different places, most namely Afghanistan, for 2 years.
When you left the service, did you keep your military sniper with you?
Of course not, sir. They take those away.
Did you buy a sniper ever after leaving your service?
Not at all. I haven't touched a sniper since I was in the military in 2017.
Then let's fast forward a second and talk about the day of the incident. What were you doing on July 4th, 2022?
I was here in Philadelphia. I came for the Capella rally.
How'd the morning start?
It was a normal day, honestly. I woke up around 5 a.m., went to the gym, and I got some breakfast.
After breakfast, where'd you go?
After breakfast, I headed over to the rally.
Who's rallying?
Thomas Capella.
And why were you headed to Senator Capella's rally?
To be honest with you, sir, I disagreed strongly with the views that Mr. Capella expressed, and I wanted to exercise my right to protest those views. That's exactly what I did. I went to protest.
Did his political views ever make you want to kill him?
No, sir. I disagreed strongly with his views, that's true. But not at any point did I ever want to kill Thomas Capella. We disagreed, and that's where that ends.
What happened during that rally?
It was about 45 minutes of the rally going on before Thomas Capella actually came out to speak. And then he came on to podium.
And after Senator Capella went to the podium?
I'll never forget what happened. It was like, as soon as he opened his mouth to speak, I heard this fake gunshot. And then all I can remember is him being on the floor.
Sir, do you know if anyone can corroborate where you were when Senator Capello was shot?
I couldn't tell you for certain, sir, but I would assume so. There were other protesters standing right next to me on both sides. There were a lot of people.
Well, I want to read something aloud and get your thoughts on it. We're reading aloud from the admitted exhibit 18, the affidavit of Frazier. On July 4th, I saw Crosby at the Capello event. I didn't talk to Crosby, I just saw Crosby at Rittenhouse Square in the crowd of protesters. I don't remember what Crosby was wearing. I can't tell you what time I saw Crosby, except it must have been after I got there at 10 a.m. and before the shooting at 1:45 p.m. He goes on to say, I'm 100% sure I saw Crosby at the Capello rally on July 4th, 2020. Sir, this witness says that he saw you somewhere between 10 and 1:45 p.m. Is that when you were at the rally?
Absolutely, sir. That's all the time.
Does that statement sound accurate to you?
It does.
And if I showed you a map of where that rally was, would you be able to point out where you were on?
I think I would.
Permission to approach the witness. We're showing opposing counsel copies of the video. Would Your Honor like a diversity copy? There you go, sir. Do you recognize that map?
I do. So this is a map of the surrounding area of Rittenhouse Square. This was where the rally was at.
At this time, we move exhibit 3 in evidence.
No objections, Your Honor.
Sir, if I handed you a pen, would you be able to circle where you were when the shooting happened?
Yeah, I think so.
Permission to approach?
So I was here. Right next to this sign that says park, kind of on the outer edge of Rittenhouse Square. That's where I was.
Were you on top of the Sonesta Hotel during that time?
No, sir.
Then let's talk about what happened after the shooting. Mr. Crosby, did the FBI ever interview you?
They did.
What'd they ask?
They asked me where I was, what I was doing, why I was here in Philadelphia, that kind of stuff.
Did they ask you if you were ever on top of that hotel?
Yes, sir.
What'd you say?
I told them no. It was a stupid mistake.
Mr. Crosby, I don't want to hide anything from the jury. Was that true?
It wasn't, sir.
Why'd you say it?
They had already brought me in for questioning, and someone had been shot. I didn't want to give them a reason to think that I had done this.
Are you lying today?
So I'm here to tell the complete truth. That's exactly what I'm doing.
Thank you. No further questions. And at this time, I'd like to publish exhibit 3 about the opposing counsel.
Your Honor, before I proceed, permission to retrieve exhibit 12 and 5 from the jury. Sure. Before I begin my cross-examination, I'd like to read a portion of exhibit 18 that opposing counsel used, lines 37 through 38.
No, Your Honor.
I took about a dozen group photos with the other protesters on July 4th, but when I went back and looked at the photos, Crosby wasn't in a single one of them. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
You told us earlier that you went to a couple of Senator Capello's rallies back in 2022, correct?
I did. I went to about 3.
Sir, you booked your flight for those 3 campaigns on April 5th, 2022. Is that true?
That sounds right, yeah,
That wasn't the only thing you did on April 5th, was it?
sure that wasn't.
I want to talk about a tweet that you posted on April 5th. You'd recognize it if I showed it to you?
I think so.
Sir, if you could go ahead and flip to exhibit 12 in your binder. For the record, this is already admitted into evidence. Sir, you recognize this document, right?
I do, ma'am.
This is a photograph of a tweet that you posted on April 5th, 2022, correct?
Yes, it is.
It's fair to say that this tweet is about Senator Capello, correct?
It was.
You're familiar with Senator Capello's agenda, correct?
I am. He wanted to defund the military.
And sir, as you mentioned earlier, you were in the military for 8 years.
That's correct.
You didn't agree with that view, did you?
Absolutely not, ma'am. I think that our military is the source of our protection in this country.
So let's talk about what you said the same day you booked a flight to see Senator Capello. You said Thomas R. Capello is a threat to everyone in this country. You said that. You said as long as he is alive, nobody's safe.
That's right. That's what I said.
You said as long as he's alive, nobody's safe the same day you booked a flight to go see Senator Capello.
Yes, ma'am. It was wrong.
You ended up going to one of those rallies, correct?
I did.
The rally Senator Capello died.
Never forget.
All right, sir, I want to talk about whether or not you knew how to kill Senator Capello. You told us earlier that you were in the military for 8 years. Is that true?
Was.
You were a sniper?
That's correct.
Sir, you'd agree with me, you were a pretty successful sniper, weren't you?
I guess you could say that, yeah.
You had won 4 separate national competitions for sniping, correct?
That's right, ma'am. I was good at my job.
You hold the record for the most bullseyes, correct?
It's true.
You know how to work a sniper, sir, don't you?
It's been a long time. I used to know how, but I do. I have that knowledge.
You were here throughout the duration of this trial, weren't you?
I was.
You heard the special agent say that the forensics lab found that Senator Capello died by a bullet specific to a sniper rifle.
I believe you said that. That's true.
You'd recognize one of those bullets if I showed it to you, wouldn't you?
I think so.
Sir, you were shown this exact bullet when you spoke with the FBI, weren't you?
Yes, ma'am. When I spoke with them, they showed me this.
And you told them that this is a commonly used bullet for sniper rifles.
That's right. In my time in the military, this was a bullet that I saw.
A bullet that you frequently used yourself.
That's correct. It's a NATO 7.62 51 millimeter. That's what snipers use.
You were also here when the special agent said that the forensics lab found that shot was from about 600 yards away, correct?
That's what he said.
During your time in the military, you could shoot from 900 yards, right?
That sounds about right.
Even 1,500 yards away, you could shoot a sniper rifle.
I did that once. I wouldn't say that I could do that with accuracy. No.
But that's a yes to my question that at some point you were certainly able to shoot a rifle from 1,500 yards away.
I hit a target one time, 1,500.
All right, sir, let's move to whether or not you had the chance to kill Senator Capello. You were staying at the Sinesta Hotel during the time of the rally, correct?
I was. That's the hotel that I stayed at.
You were staying at the top floor, weren't you?
That's right.
You were staying in a room right next to the stairwell to the rooftop.
It was a stairwell. That's true. Yes.
Sir, you weren't randomly placed in that room, were you?
No. I actually asked.
You specifically requested to be put on the top floor.
That's right, man. It's kind of a thing with my training to make sure that I'm able to exit quickly. I asked to be next to the exit.
You specifically requested to be next to the stairwell that led to the rooftop of that hotel.
I did. I asked to be next to the stairwell.
All right, sir, I want to talk about maybe something we can agree. You'd agree it's generally not a good thing to lie, right?
Of course, man.
So certainly you never lied.
Are you asking me about what I'm doing today?
No, sir, I want to talk about something you did earlier in this case. You lied to the FBI investigators, didn't you?
I did. I told them that I wasn't on that rooftop. and I actually was.
Let's break down the whole story that you gave. Those investigators asked you, have you ever been to your hotel's roof, correct?
That's correct, yes,
Said no.
that's right. The first time I answered that question, I said no, it was a student mistake.
They didn't ask you just once, did they?
No, ma'am, they asked again.
It took them to ask you 3 separate times for you to finally tell the truth.
That's when I told them that I was on the rooftop.
Let's talk about the other piece of evidence they showed you that made you tell the truth. Sir, they showed you this cigarette.
Yes, ma'am, actually, I think they talked about it. They did.
They asked you, did you ever smoke this on the rooftop of your hotel?
Not quite, they told me that they found a fingerprint on a cigarette, and, I believe that's what you're holding up.
Well, sir, initially you said that this cigarette didn't belong to you, correct?
That's right.
It wasn't until they told you your fingerprint was on the cigarette that you confessed.
That's right. They told me they found my fingerprint, and that's when I told them everything.
It wasn't until the investigator showed you physical evidence tying you to this cigarette, tying you to that rooftop, that you told them you were on that roof.
That's when I told them the truth. Yeah.
Sir, you say that you hid the truth because you thought you would look guilty.
And they brought me in for questioning when someone was killed. Of course I didn't want to tell them. Yes, that's true, ma'am.
You lied to investigators 3 separate times because you thought it would make you look guilty.
It is a scary time when people are accusing you of shooting someone. Yes, I lied to the FBI. It was a stupid mistake, and I'm sorry for that, but that is what I did.
And now you're telling us that you're telling the complete truth to these members of the jury.
100%, ma'am.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
No redirect, Your Honor. Yes, the witness be allowed to step down.
Anything else?
No, Your Honor, we rest our case in chief and we're ready to move into close.
You ready? You want to break?
Yes, Your Honor, just permission to rearrange some of the exhibits. Yeah, I see. Members of the jury, there are a few things in life that we just happen to be asked over and over again. Your name, where you're from, when's your birthday. Unless you're in some sort of witness protection, I think it's pretty safe to say that you have the same answer every time. You don't have to think too hard about it or hesitate. It's the answer when it's the truth. It doesn't change. When you have nothing to hide, your story doesn't change. This defendant was asked, did you ever go on your hotel's roof? Said no. When the defendant was asked, did you smoke this cigarette on that rooftop of your hotel? Said no. We heard in court today that his story changed. After he was forced to admit, he said, oh, you're right, I was on that hotel roof. Oh, you're right, I did smoke that cigarette on the roof. He told you it's because he thought he would look guilty, but members of the jury, innocent people, don't have to worry about things like that. Because when you're telling the truth, your story doesn't change. Lies do. The defendant's story did. Because the defendant's politics turned personal. So he shot that senator. But as I'm sure the defense will remind you, we couldn't just tell this to you, we had to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's exactly what we did today. Because we showed you that the defendant was the only one who wanted the senator dead knew how to do it, and had the chance to do it. It's all of these three things together, pointing squarely to the defendant. To show you how we met our burden, I want to walk you through the three things that we proved. First, the defendant wanted the senator dead. And this one's pretty easy to prove because all we have to do is look to the defendant's words themselves. As long as Senator Capello is alive, no one is safe. And you heard from the defendant himself exactly why he wanted the senator dead. The senator wanted to defund the military. The defendant was in the military for 8 years, and he told you he vehemently disagreed with that senator. Now, members of the jury, I'll be upfront. If we didn't have all the other evidence in this case, maybe that tweet would just come off as disagreement. Maybe that tweet wouldn't be such a serious threat. But it becomes serious when we look at what else the defendant did. And that's what brings me to my second. The defendant knew how to kill Senator Capello. Members of the jury, the defense keeps trying to tell you, well, where's the rifle? Where's the sniper rifle? Members of the jury, of course we can't find the rifle. If you're going to assassinate a political candidate, you better get rid of the evidence. And I want to remind you that this isn't beyond all doubt. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. And we haven't heard evidence of a single other person who had knowledge on how to use a military-grade sniper rifle other than the defendant. We heard the defendant knows how to shoot that rifle from the exact distance that the senator just happened to be shot from. We know the defendant used the exact same type of rifle that the senator just happened to be shot with. Members of the jury, we have proven that the defendant knew exactly how to use the weapon that just happened to kill that senator. And I want to remind you that the defendant, when shown the bullet, the same bullet that was used to shoot that senator, said he knew this exact type of bullet, he used it frequently. We have proven the defendant's knowledge. So that brings me to my third. We know the defendant had a chance to kill that senator. Despite what the defense wants you to believe by showing you an eyewitness that may have seen the defendant between the hours of 10 and 1:45, let's not forget everything that eyewitness said. I took about a dozen group photos with the other protests, but when I looked back, Crosby wasn't in a single one of them. So if he wasn't at the rally, where was he? Well, we know where he was, because we heard that someone at the hotel was 100% certain that they saw the defendant walking up to the rooftop on July 4th, moments before the senator was shot. Even if you think that 100% identification isn't enough, let's not forget about the physical evidence. We showed you a cigarette. The defense would like you to believe there's a hole in this story because we can't prove that the defendant was actually on that rooftop, but I want to remind you that there was only one piece of DNA evidence found on that roof, on the roof that was confirmed to be the location where the senator was shot. The only piece of DNA was a 1 in 6.2 billion match to the defendant. We have proven the defendant had the chance and that he was there to go through. Members of the jury, we are not saying that people can't disagree with candidates. And we're not saying that it's just one piece of evidence that ties it all together. It is all of the pieces of evidence. It's the totality of the circumstances that point to this defendant and this defendant alone. This defendant let politics turn personal, and he killed that senator. We ask that you hold him accountable, so that you find the defendant guilty. Thank you for your time.
Or become an defendant. They can't hide the holes. This young's right. We're asked questions every day. Where are you from? What's your name? But you know what you don't do when you're asked those questions? You don't say nothing. You don't leave those questions unanswered. There's questions about facts. You should have answers. But in today's case, there are 3 questions, 3 holes that the government can't answer, can't plug up, can't hide. And that's a problem. Because in today's case, the government had the burden of proving their case beyond a reasonable doubt, the very highest burden in our legal system. They couldn't just tell you that politics turned personal and Blake Crosby shot the senator. They had to prove it. And they failed to meet their burden. Because 3 holes are still left unplugged. 1, can we be sure where Blake Crosby was? 2, how would Mr. Crosby have acquired a sniper rifle? And 3, could somebody else have committed this crime? Let's break those down one at a time. Starting with hole number 1, can we be sure where Mr. Crosby was? Because the question in this case, it's not, was Mr. Crosby on the roof or was he in the ground? That would be an easy mistake. The question is between proof and reasonable doubt. And in this case, you heard 2 conflicting accounts. Opposing counsel repeats again and again, their witness is 100% sure that she saw the defendant in that hotel. But members of the jury, we can do the same thing. I am 100% sure I saw Crosby at the Capello rally on July 4th, 2022. And when you have 2 people 100% sure that they saw Mr. Crosby in different places, that is reasonable doubt. All we're saying is you can't be sure, which means the government hasn't met their burden, and that's a hole that can't be hidden. Let's move to hole number 2. How would Mr. Crosby have acquired a military-grade sniper rifle? Because you heard Agent DeVico testify today, and you heard him say they didn't find purchase records in any of the places that Mr. Crosby stayed after flying from Hawaii. How would he have gotten a weapon of that caliber? What does the government expect you to believe? That Mr. Crosby checked it on his flight? That's unreasonable. That's not how this works. Their own agent said, I'm not sure how he concealed it. Think about what that means. They're asking you to assume he had it, assume that he concealed it, when they have no evidence of that at all. That's a hole in their case. Hole number 3. Could somebody else have committed this crime? Because opposing counsel wants to say politics turned personal. And there's something that rings true about that, because we've all been touched by politics in one way or another. But we've all been touched by politics in one way or another. To assume that Mr. Crosby was the only person who could have committed this crime, when you learn today that there were thousands of people sending death threats, thousands of people who had access to the location that the kill shot was fired from, is unreasonable. Opposing counsel hinges their entire case on the fact that Mr. Crosby smoked a cigarette on the rooftop. This is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Crosby was even there on the 4th of July. It's proof he was there at some point, but not proof he fired a weapon and not proof he's guilty. They haven't met their burden. There are just too many holes. Now, members of the jury, in a case like this, it's a tough task in front of you, but I want to simplify it. Because in a few moments, you're going to go back to deliberate. and you're going to be shown a jury verdict form. And it boils this case down to one question. On count one, how do you find guilty or not? And when you're looking at this verdict form, I want you to think about all of the holes in the government's case, holes they can't plug. Because the government is asking you to fill those holes with assumption after assumption. Assume that Mr. Crosby was on the top of the Sonesta Hotel. Assume that he had access to a military-grade sniper rifle. Assume that nobody of the thousands of other people who sent the senator death threats could have done this. Prove their case today. That was their job. It's not your job to assume their case for them. There are too many holes. Check not guilty. And find Mr. Crosby so. Thank you.
For procedure, Your Honor, may I ask how much time I have remaining?
You got 1 minute and 13 seconds.
Thank you. Members of the jury, opposing counsel keeps talking about these assumptions that he thinks we do. But I want to make sure we understand the difference between assumptions and circumstantial evidence. Because as the judge will tell you, circumstantial evidence is just as powerful as direct evidence. So when they ask, how can we be sure where the defendant was, and we bring you a cigarette butt that doesn't just have his DNA, but has gunshot residue. When they try and tell you that we can't bring you the rifle, but we tell you that the bullet and the trigger guard of that rifle were found in the exact 2 locations the defendant just happened to be in. When we show you that the defendant is the only person that had a threat and also had specialized military grade knowledge and also was seen going to the rooftop where that gunshot came from, those aren't assumptions, members of the jury. That's evidence. That's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant's politics turned personal, but our law doesn't let people get away with murder. We ask that you find the defendant guilty. Thank you.